Good morning. This is Daniel from Copwatch TV, and we are going to do another live event this morning. Just like we did last week, what's really important is the interaction with the audience and us. So if you have any questions or comments, not just about past videos that we've done, though we'd love to talk about that, anything that's happening in the law enforcement world or the police world. Every day there's new stories, there's new incidents that happen. So any kind of questions that you have, definitely put in the chat, and we'd be more than happy to answer. So again, my name is Daniel with Copwatch TV. If you want to follow me, you can do that on YouTube or TikTok at Police Law News. Otherwise, we appreciate everybody watching this, but please make sure that you like and subscribe and hit the notification button so you can be aware of when we do these live events. We are going to do live events every Friday is what the goal is. So please let us know what types of questions you have. While people are still coming into the chat, we did have some questions from last week that either came in after the live was over or during the live that, I just wasn't prepared to answer. So I do think that engagement with the audience is important. So we do have answers to some of those questions. So let me at least get to one or two of them, while people are still coming into this live. So last week, someone asked about, because we did post, and the audience really likes videos about people getting arrested for driving while intoxicated, just the raw police body cam video for driving while intoxicated arrests. And we have posted several videos about that. So someone asked a really good question, and it was, why do police officers give the standardized field sobriety tests? Why not just go right to a breath test? That's a really good question. And so what they mean by the standardized field sobriety test, that's essentially the three different tests that officers give on the side of the road. The walk and turn test, the one leg stand test, and then the first test is the one where the officer is tracking the eyes. So the reason is because a breath test machine, which is typically used by law enforcement agencies, is called an Intoxilyzer 8000. Police officers can't have those in their vehicles. So that's nothing that's portable. So they're only at the substation. So in order for a police officer to get a driver from the road and transport them physically, which is a seizure under the Fourth Amendment, to a substation, in place that there would have to be probable cause for an arrest. Well, in order to get to probable cause for arrest, police officers use these standardized field sobriety tests to see if there are signs of impairment. So it's once that investigation is over with, and then only if there's probable cause to believe that someone is driving while under the influence, it's at that point that a police officer can make an arrest and take someone for a breath test. And that is the reason why standardized field sobriety tests are given and why police officers just don't go right to a breath test. And again, that is an absolute excellent question. We do have a couple others that came in after, but if anybody has any in the chat that they would like me to go over or comments about past videos, I definitely like to engage with that now. So let's see what we have going on here in the chat. So we do have some information about, or some people talking about the Uvalde shooting. So there isn't a question on that, but, I think that's still on everybody's minds, and it absolutely should be, because it was a horrible tragedy that happened. And we have a couple different entities. So we have the Uvalde City Police Department, and then we have the Uvalde Independent Schools Districts. And the school district has its own police department, and the chief of that is Pete Arredondo. So Pete Arredondo, he was the incident commander when this incident took place. He's the police chief of the school district, which has 6 different schools. So one interesting thing about what's happening there is that prior to this incident happening, Pete Arredondo, the chief, he ran for city council, and he actually won. He won a seat on the city council. He got over 70% of the vote. So locally, he was an extremely popular person. And the swearing in of the city council was scheduled to happen 1 week after the Uvalde shooting occurred. So there was a lot of questions about, well, is he still going to be sworn in? And there's nothing in the Texas state constitution or in the local charter that would prevent that. So it wasn't widely publicized, but in a secret ceremony that I say secret because typically these are public. These are public events, but it was exactly 1 week after the Uvalde school shooting. Pete Arredondo was sworn in as a city councilor in the Uvalde, Texas. So that is something that's kind of interesting going on there. Let's see if we have any other comments, questions in the chat. Tom Dorfler, why are cops cowards? That's well, I'm gonna I don't think that's a great question. So if there's a specific incident about you think police officers did something incorrectly or acted cowardly, if you want to put that in the chat, and then let's talk about a specific incident. The reason is because there's over 700,000 law enforcement officers, so to say that all police are anything probably isn't accurate. Saying that they're all cowards, all heroic, all good, all bad, that just probably isn't an accurate description to talk about a group of over 700,000 people. But if you have a specific incident that you want to talk about, I'm more than happy to. Because the goal of this isn't to make police officers look good or police officers look bad. The goal of this is to be honest and to look at incidents. And when police officers make mistakes or do something incorrect, it is more important to call that out and to talk about it so we don't so police officers either don't make that kind of mistake again or they can learn from that mistake. So that's the goal of this. But yeah, if you have any specific questions about an incident, more than happy to talk about it. How does this channel feel about actual cop watchers? Well, I can't speak for the entire channel because we have people here who do research and production, but the way that I feel about cop watchers, and I've actually talked a lot about this incident, and just to be as honest as I can be, when it comes to channels like, I'm gonna give someone a shout out like Long Island Audit and channels like that. When I watch things like that, a lot of us, you can just binge it because it's just so interesting. So I love videos like that. I think they're interesting. And most of the time, in a lot of the videos that I watch, the cop watchers are doing, constitutionally protected activity. So they will go into a post office and they will just record. And then police officers are called, and really they're essentially doing a test on the police officers or an audit to see if the police officers are going to violate their constitutionally protected rights. So I think they're absolutely legal to do that, and the videos are interesting. And from the side of police, when I watch and what I hope for is that the police officers are nice, that they are polite, they are professional, they give their name and badge number, and they do not violate anybody's constitutional rights. So those are some of my thoughts about the cop watchers or the auditors. Let's see. All right. So when it comes to a polygraph, so we did get a question about a polygraph, and so a lie detector test, and whether or not a lie detector test is admissible in court. And the short answer is no. So lie detector tests are not admissible in court. They just don't reach the standard that any court would allow them in as evidence. Now, that doesn't mean that police departments don't use them, because they do. There are things where just because a court may not recognize it as part of an investigation into a crime, a police department, detectives with a police department might use them as part of their investigation just to see if they're on the right track or wrong track. So they are used by police departments. Obviously it is on a voluntary basis, but the results, no matter what they are, would not be admissible in court. So that's the situation when it comes to polygraph tests. They also use polygraph tests in pre-hiring for law enforcement. So many police departments do a polygraph test as part of the initial battery of tests when hiring someone to become a police officer before the police academy. So they are not 100% accurate, can't be used in court, but law enforcement agencies, a lot of them do use them for multiple different things. And we Disabled Patriot said, police are not liable for our safety by the law. That's absolutely correct. And I think I touched on this last week, but just to recap a little bit, there are a couple different Supreme Court cases. The last one, I believe, was in 2005, which essentially said that police officers cannot be held liable for not protecting someone. So there's no criminal liability to police officers or civil liability to police officers if they fail to act. So that is an absolute correct statement. There are a couple different Supreme Court cases on that exact issue. We have a question or a comment from Kristen F.E. Would you agree that police officers should be required a lot more schooling and training, especially when it comes to mental health? So you asked about a couple different things, so schooling and then training for mental health. So if we take those two issues a little bit separately, a lot of police departments, have in the past required either 60 college credit hours or a 4-year degree, and that's obviously not, what that hurts is recruiting police officers. So when you look at different police departments, when they enact those types of policies, the amount of officers that they get hired is less because the pool of people is lower. So, obviously that would be up to each individual police department whether or not they want to enact that. But if you can imagine a large metropolitan police department that is, 300 officers short. So in the last 2 years, the Seattle Police Department has lost 25% of their officers. They are doing everything they can to recruit police officers from around the country. So in a situation like that, it probably wouldn't make a lot of sense to have any kind of educational requirement. But maybe for other police departments it would. Now, when it comes to mental health training, absolutely. That is something that all police officers should have. Now, it might be called different things in different states, but usually it's called something to the effect of crisis intervention training. And no matter how much of that training you get, it could be a 40-hour block or an 80-hour block, but no matter how much training you get from that, a police officer is never going to be, almost never going to be, a mental health counselor. So those types of trainings are great. Police officers should get as much of it as possible. And actually, most states require it by state law. Per the training that officers have to go through, that there is yearly updates on that. So as much training as possible when it comes to mental health is absolutely fantastic. What a lot of police departments have also done is they have mental health crisis units, or they call it something similar. And essentially what that is where a police officer and a master's level mental health clinician actually ride together. And once other police officers have made the scene safe, so it's not a dangerous and dynamic situation, that the mental health, that the police officer who has extra training in mental health awareness and a master's level clinician can both go ahead and contact people in the field. So progressive police departments and that's a really good idea for police departments to do, and a lot of the departments are doing that type of thing to help with this issue. Okay, so Corey asked, if police are not liable for our safety, what is the point of their existence? Why have them around? So when I say they're not liable for our safety, that means in court. So if you want a police officer to, doesn't protect you or does something wrong or fails to act or makes a mistake, not protecting someone, they can't be held liable in court. So they can't go to jail and they can't get sued civilly. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't department policies that they violate. So even though if a police officer fails to act, just because they can't go to jail or get sued civilly doesn't mean that they didn't violate any different protocols. And if there is an incident like that, a lot of times what happens with police officers is that there is still an internal investigation and, possibly mental health. They might look into the mental health of the officer to see if this is an actual good fit for him or her. So just because, and you can imagine a situation where if someone fails to protect someone in a pretty significant incident, that the other police officers who work with that individual might not think it's safe to work with that individual. So there is a point to police officers, and just because they can't go to jail for it doesn't mean that most of them don't protect people on a daily basis. Let's see. So let's see, we have any other questions here coming in. Let's see. Okay. All right, so we have questions about Amber Heard, which is great. Everybody knows that Johnny Depp won that trial. I think he won $15 million, but it was lowered to somewhere just over $10 million, and Amber Heard won $2 million. So Johnny Depp should net somewhere around $8 million. But her attorney has said that she's going to appeal the judgment, which she can do. However, if there weren't you can't appeal like the amount. But Amber Heard would be able to appeal if there were any legal problems, legal issues. If a judge made a mistake with not allowing some evidence in, those are the kinds of issues that Amber Heard can go ahead and appeal. Her attorney has said that she doesn't have $8 million to pay, which also could be an issue. And if she tried to declare bankruptcy, this is one of those things where declaring bankruptcy actually wouldn't do anything to the $8 million debt, because she was found it was because the libel and the defamation of character, it was an intentional act. So declaring bankruptcy wouldn't help her at all. So that's on Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So Jeremy Dewitt, we do have some questions about Jeremy Dewitt, and his videos are all over the internet. I believe we've done one on him on Cop Watch TV. He is a serial police impersonator out of Florida near Osceola County and in Orange County. I believe he's in jail now. His videos, he ran a company called Metro State that did funeral escorts, but he would outfit the motorcycles and the uniform that he would wear in an effort to essentially look just like a police officer. He would have a badge. He would have what looks like a gun. If you just looked at it, it would just look like a gun, but it was actually a pepper ball gun. But there was no yellow or orange indication on it. And that one of the last times that he was arrested was for having that pepper ball gun while he was driving around. So just really quick on that one, and I'm not going to defend Jeremy Dewitt because he is a serial liar and a police impersonator, and he records everything on his own body cam, and the videos are absolutely hilarious. It's kind of like the auditor, the videos about the police auditors. Once you start watching it, you just can't get enough of Jeremy Dewitt body cam video. But one of the last times he was arrested, and he actually had kind of a good point because he had the pepper ball gun and it was not concealed. He was carrying it in an outside holster, and he was stopped by police, and he was arrested for carrying a concealed weapon. Well, he was stopped for the weapon. So if the officer can see it, then it isn't concealed, which is a pretty logical argument. And Jeremy actually made it on scene. What's interesting about that is the sergeant who made that arrest. I can't remember which county it was in Florida, but he's actually been up for termination because of the department has accused him of an unlawful arrest of Jeremy in that particular case, and I believe that he has his hearing coming up soon. So that's one of the interesting turns in that. Okay, let's see. So we have a lot of people ask, why we do this channel. What are some of the goals of this channel? And before we talk about that, again, I just want to thank everybody for watching, everybody who likes this channel and subscribes and comments. And again, anything that we can do better, please let us know. Meaning, if you want videos on certain topics, if you want us to do live events where we cover certain topics, please let us know. We definitely would like to. But the reason that we started this channel in the first place is because we wanted the interaction, the raw interaction that police officers have with individuals on the street, from someone's best day of their life to the worst day of their life. When that's captured on body camera, it's such an amazing thing to be able to see and to witness. I mean, before body camera, almost never before can just regular people be able to watch what the interactions of police officers are. So that's why we do this, is to just put the information out there. And again, the goal isn't to make police look bad or make police look good. The goal is to be honest and to put out raw video of police interactions that isn't edited. And then, I do come in with a lot of videos where I give my opinion on the video, or I answer questions about the video. But that's really the goal of this, is to just put out the honest and raw interactions that police officers have with citizens. Kristen FE says, do you think citizens should be disarmed? So that's a controversial topic. And no, I don't think that citizens should be disarmed. I could talk about this for an hour, but kind of like one of the other questions we had today where, it says that, the Supreme Court cases where it says that police officers don't have a legal duty to protect. Well, if police officers don't have a legal duty to protect, it seems like that would shade more in the favor of citizens wanting to be armed. Now, I think that when people talk about reasonable or common sense gun control laws, I don't want to just say be negative or positive to that statement. What I'm more interested in is, what is the law? What is the idea? So let's talk about the individual policy that is being proposed. And then let's talk about what's the goal of that policy. So if we know what the policy is and we know what the goal is, and then we could see, okay, is this the best way to get there? And I think that's an interesting conversation to have. And if anybody has ideas about different gun control laws or laws that are on the books that you don't like, definitely put them in the comments. We can go through them and address them, because that is an incredibly interesting topic, especially, after what happened in Uvalde a couple weeks ago. There are a lot of calls for different gun laws to come into place. Now, it should be noted that the shooter in Uvalde, he broke several gun laws. So it's illegal in Texas to carry a concealed handgun unless you have a concealed carry permit, which he didn't have. It's also illegal to carry a gun onto school premises. So he broke that law too. He also broke our murder laws. So he broke a lot of laws that day. But if there are any laws or policies that might be enacted to maybe make some of this stuff, these shootings, either not happen or be more difficult, I think it's definitely extremely interesting to talk about individual policies and what the goals of those are. All right, so let's see. We have a question about Trudeau in Canada, but I'll get that here in a second. DJ Smith says, hi, everybody. I'm new to the channel. Well, welcome, DJ. If you have any questions about any topics or anything you like, please let us know. And let's see. What do you think about the Trudeau ordering citizens in Canada to disarm? I know that's Canadian politics, but overall, do you think that's radical? Yeah, I do think it's radical, and I'll be 100% transparent. I don't know anything about Canadian law, unless it's Jordan Peterson talking about free speech issues. Politics in Canada, I'm just not all that familiar with, so I wish I could talk more about it on a legal level. I just don't know. To me, it seems like a bad idea. But if we do have anybody from Canada, so that's a good question. Do we have anybody from Canada on here that knows, that might be able to add in a comment or give a little more context? We definitely like to hear from some subject matter experts on the issue from Canada if we happen to have any. So we have human dancer. I was told he bought the guns illegally. So I'm not sure who we're talking about, but if we're talking about the shooter in Uvalde, he did not buy the guns illegally. So they were all purchased at firearm stores through firearm dealers. He did go through a federal background check. And because the shooter, he passed that background check. So because he didn't have any criminal convictions, he didn't have any felonies on his record, a court never found him mentally defective, and there were no restraining orders against him. So those are some of the things where if you have any of those things on your record that, most of the time would make it so you can't buy a firearm. I'm sure someone will correct me about the restraining order thing. That could be state to state. But, those are typically at least some of the elements that are looked at and are sometimes a barrier to purchasing firearms. So he didn't have any of those on his record. So reasonable question to ask is, well, he was 18. So, if everything from his juvenile record is essentially sealed, the window of time from when he turned 18 to when he bought the guns was like a couple days. So, well, of course there isn't anything on his record. So if that's the question or the criticism, I think it's reasonable. Let's see. Okay, SMCG. Cops are only responsible for enforcing the laws, not give judgment, not punish someone, but to write paperwork and control situations that are out of control. Yeah, I think that's fair. In the spirit of police officers investigate crimes, but it's up to attorneys and prosecutors to prosecute those crimes, and then judges or juries to determine if someone is actually guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah, so that's absolutely fair. Let's see what else we have going on here in the chat. Where did he get the money? So that was a DJ Smith. Thank you. Where did he get the money? So that's a good question, and I've actually looked into that, and as best as I could, just trying to see what different media outlets have said about that, because he was working at Wendy's part time, and the estimate of at least one of the firearms that he purchased was over $2,000. So where did he get the money? That's a good question. No one, as far as I know, has an answer to that yet. But he was working a part-time job at Wendy's, so who knows what other funds he might have had, but he bought expensive high-end firearms, and it seems like, he was a situation where he wasn't making a whole lot of money, but he was living at home, so who knows if he was paying rent or had a car payment, but that's a great question that we just don't know yet, where he got the money for that. But he didn't put them on credit card. The reports are that he didn't buy them on credit card, that he actually paid in full for the firearms and the ammo. Let's see. Polk County Sheriff Grady openly said, we go in. And yeah, as we talked about last week, that's standard operating procedure. When there's an active shooter, police officers go in. There's no waiting. There is no waiting till you have 80 of your best friends there to go in. If there's an active shooter, whether it's at a school, a grocery store, any type of active shooter where there is shooting going on, the training and the best practices for all of law enforcement that I'm aware of is you go in as fast as you can towards the gunshots, and you take out the person who's causing the harm as quickly as possible. That's the standard. That's the training. Anything other than that is law enforcement not doing their job. So yeah, sheriffs like Sheriff Grady, he's on the news all the time. He has a lot of really good and interesting statements, and yeah, he came out almost right away and he made that statement, which is a good thing to do. So let's see what else we have. All right, let's see. So one other question that we had from last week is the Jalen Randall shooting in Houston. So I was asked about that case, so I'm going to talk about that for a second. So not to get anybody's hopes up, but I don't have an opinion on that shooting yet, but I have a lot of questions about it. So Jalen Randall in Houston, the body camera video from multiple officers are online on different channels. I believe the Houston Police Department even came out and did a statement about it. But essentially, it was someone who had a felony warrant. There was a car chase. Jalen was the passenger. The driver of the car fled. The police officers used a pit maneuver to stop the car, which is, for lack of a better term, police officers, you have to be trained and certified to do this, but essentially officers crash into the car and disable the car from moving forward. Once the car was disabled, Jalen got out of the passenger side. And if you can imagine it, the Officer Pivette, who was the officer, I believe I'm saying his name right, Officer Pivette, who was the shooter in this incident, if you can imagine it, he was pretty much head on with the car that Jalen was in. So Jalen exited from the passenger side, and Officer Pivette, I believe, also exited from the passenger side. So essentially the hoods of both of their vehicles are kind of in between. As Jalen exited the car, he had a couple things in his hand. He had a bag and he had a shoe. As the officer was giving him commands, pretty quickly the officer fires one shot. As soon as the officer fires a shot, he says, "Oh shit." That was a fatal shot to Jalen. They did find out later on that in that bag, there was a firearm. It was in the bag. He wasn't holding the firearm, except that it was in the bag. So he had a bag and then a shoe in his hands. And that's that situation. So until we know So a reasonable question to ask is when there's a police-involved shooting, if after the officer shoots, the officer yells or says, "Oh shit," well, that should make reasonable people ask questions like, was this intentional or was this not intentional? So if we just take a second to go down both of those rabbit holes. So if it was intentional, then we need to hear from the police officer about why he shot. So in order for a police officer to use deadly force, they have to be able to articulate an immediate deadly threat to themselves or someone else. So what was the perception from the police officer on why he fired the shot in that moment? We don't know what that is, so it's hard to make a judgment on the police officer's state of mind. Now, if it was an accident, then it's more of a Kim Potter thing, where the officer wasn't doing it intentionally. So if an officer uses force, especially deadly force, and it's not intentional, well, there really isn't an excuse for that. And we know what happens to police officers who use deadly force on accident. Kim Potter just got little over 2 years. Well, she got 2 years, but I think after the time already served, 16 months. So I'm not saying that, when it comes to anyone being convicted, we can't say that, but it's definitely in the realm of a criminal investigation if a police officer uses deadly force on accident or is negligent in doing so. So Ben Crump is the attorney for the family. He's made a lot of statements recently. Obviously, he's saying things like he says in most cases, which if you're a good attorney, Ben Crump are attorneys who represent not just victims of police shootings, but any attorney anywhere. If they are doing their job, they are zealously advocating for their client. So they're not necessarily worried about the truth or being fair or being honest or now they can't outright lie, but those aren't the top concerns and they shouldn't be the top concerns. So they can't outright lie, but they have to zealously represent their client. I may disagree with a lot of the things that Ben Crump says because I don't always think they're true, but he does a good job representing his clients, and he's been successful in representing his clients, which as an attorney, he does well as an attorney in that respect. Anyways, he is representing the family in this case, and he obviously wants the police officer fired, and he wants the police officer charged with a crime. He's called for that publicly. Also, this officer Pivette, there was an incident in 2017 where he was charged with either assault or aggravated assault against another individual. So Ben Crump brought that up as well, the officer's history. Now, the history of the officer has most of the time it's going to have very little to do with the incident we're talking about, but that has been brought up, even though the charges against the officer were dismissed in 2019. So that's a little bit on the Jalen Randall shooting. When we have more information, I can talk about it more, but it's hard to give any more opinion on it without having some more information, though the body cam is available. Okay, DJ Smith says, what is ND? I'm not sure what we're talking about. North Dakota? I don't know. So I guess it would be negligent discharge. So ND. So typically in when people are charged with different things, negligent discharge of a firearm would be ND. Okay. So S. Meg said, has anyone ever asked you this? Have you heard of policemen and normal citizens working together and having a cop beat someone and the citizen collect money and share it with the officer? No, I've never heard of that. I said there are hundreds of thousands of police officers. Some of them aren't good, so I haven't heard of that. But if you have a situation where that happened, please let us know. We can go ahead and talk about it. And I just want to thank you so much for asking that question. That was a super chat question. And if you have any more on that, please put it in the chat. We'd be more than happy to answer. Unfortunately, I haven't heard of that happening. It seems like if that did happen, that would be criminal on the part of the police officer. So not only would the police officer most likely violate internal policies, but that officer would likely be prosecuted as well, and also probably be prosecuted on the federal level for civil rights violations. So if you have any information about that happening, let us know. We'd love to talk about an individual incident, but nothing that I can think of that has ever happened. So DJ Smith's pit maneuvers should be illegal. Yeah, that's a good point. So just really quick on pit maneuvers. Every department has different policies on that, but if a car is going over 30 or 35 miles an hour, police officers typically aren't permitted to pit unless deadly force is authorized. And so let's just walk through this just for a second here. You have an individual who committed some type of crime, typically a serious crime if the police officers are chasing. Well, police officers have a couple different options in order to stop somebody. So they can do a high-speed police pursuit through the city in broad daylight with lots of people around. I think we all agree that's a bad idea. That's dangerous for whoever they're chasing, the police, and the citizens. Any traffic on the road. That's not a great idea. Well, we could wait till later until, this person who, maybe has felony warrants or has been violent. Well, we could just wait till they get home. Well, then police have to go in and do a no-knock warrant or a high-risk warrant. And we've seen how police not only are they criticized for that, but, people ask, why are you doing this high-risk warrant? And there's a lot, we can do a whole show on that one day, and I think we should. But police are criticized for that. So when we use a pit maneuver, and when police use a pit maneuver, you have to think, okay, it's a situation where they have to get this person into custody. So if the person is driving 10, 15, 20 miles an hour, and the police officer can use the vehicle to disable it, it stops the chase, makes sure that all the other citizens are safe. They don't have to go in later with like a no-knock warrant. Like, is this a reasonable thing to do? So I think in some situations, yes. In some situations, no. The situation with Jalen Randall, it's, from what I can see, is the pit maneuver wasn't the issue. The issue is obviously at the exact moment that the officer fired the shot that we're all going to have some questions about. Someone said, Amber Heard's, oh my goodness, 120-mile pits are pretty epic. Yeah, and if you pit, let's say, typically police officers cannot use the pit maneuver for over 35 miles an hour, I think, unless deadly force is authorized. So pitting at 120 miles an hour would be deadly force. Police officers also aren't allowed to pit motorcycles, again, unless deadly force is authorized. So the idea of police officers pitting people for jaywalking warrants at 50 miles an hour, not a thing that typically happens, and it shouldn't. Let's see. So let's go one more question here. And then, we'll probably wrap this up. But before we do, I just want to thank everyone again for being a part of this, for watching it. Make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. And, we are going to do this on Fridays. That's typically where we're going to have our live events, so we want to keep it up. So like I said, any questions you might have, let us know. Any topics, maybe even if you say we have a bunch of people who want to hear just about no-knock warrants, and we could just do a whole topic on that and talk about some of the main cases that have been in the news about no-knock warrants, or any other topic. This show is really for you, and to have a sounding board to discuss these really important public issues. So one more question or comment here. Let's see what we got. So we have information about pits, moving car in general. Thanks for the discussion. Awesome content. That's so nice. Thank you so much, Amber Heard's bad turd. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, but some of the other. So the last thing I'm going to say is, and we can get into it more next week when we do this, that I think is an important case that's going on now, is the Tony Timpa case in Texas. So in 2016, Tony Timpa had an incident with Dallas police officers, and he was involved in a mental health crisis. Police officers, he was already handcuffed by security. Police officers kept the handcuffs on. They shackled his legs, and he was kind of thrashing around. And essentially, they put him face down in the prone position with his face in the grass for 13 minutes. One of the officers had his hands on the upper shoulders of Tony and a knee in his back for almost the whole 13 minutes while paramedics were arriving on scene. And Mr. Timpa ended up dying. So this was before George Floyd, but eerily similar. Mr. Timpa died in a similar fashion. And there were initial charges against the 3 or 4 Dallas police officers. However, the charges were dismissed. And this week, what's interesting is that this past week, the Supreme Court, so the family obviously wanted to sue the police officers. And there is qualified immunity both on the federal level and in Texas. So they took it. The family challenged it all the way to the Supreme Court. And earlier this week, the Supreme Court said that the police officers in this case cannot claim qualified immunity, that they can be sued civilly and personally. So that was a ruling that just came out. So that trial will be happening. So again, this isn't going to be criminal charges against the officers. This is the civil charges, but it's qualified immunity. And the last thing I'll say about qualified immunity, and a lot of people have a lot of problems with it, and this is another great topic to talk about, but with qualified immunity, when police officers do violate clearly established constitutional rights, which I think happened in the Tony Timpa case, police officers cannot hide behind or not hide behind or use qualified immunity as a defense. So this is an instance where we can look at it objectively, where police officers didn't do the right thing and they're not able to use qualified immunity. And this is pretty much how this system, this judge-made law of qualified immunity, was made. It's to protect police officers in dynamic situations who have to make split-second decisions, but not to protect police officers who are acting poorly and violating clearly established rights. Okay, so that's how we're going to end it today. I just want to say thank you for everyone who joined in, who watched, who added comments. I really appreciate everybody's the participation of everyone. Please like the channel and subscribe, share with your friends. Also, if you want to follow me individually, you can follow me at Police Law News, either on YouTube or on TikTok. I do daily videos, short videos about current news issues. So I want to thank everyone for their participation and have a great weekend.